This is Frederick Meekins of the Issachar Apologetics Research Institute. On International Women's Day, wonder how many will have the guts to point out that the majority of misery celebrated during this festive occasion is the fault of radical Islam. Isn't insisting Donald Trump's own rhetoric is at fault for the near riot breaking out in Chicago akin to blaming a scantily clad woman that she got raped? Too bad the leftist media is not as outraged by the knockout game perpetuated by ghetto youth, usually upon unsuspecting whites, as they are about the few punches thrown at Donald Trump events. So I guess if Marco Rubio has his way, not only should protesters be allowed to disrupt candidate events, but they should also be thanked by lavishing such human detritus with increased welfare handouts. Apparently Chips is to be remade as an action comedy. If the series was considered a serious police procedural in the 70s, shouldn't the source material be similarly respected today? If Hillary is so against bullies, wonder if she has anything to say what her husband and Butch Reno did to the Branch Davidians. Rubio says conservatism cannot be about anger and division. But aren't there things you are supposed to be angry about and not want to be part of? If you disrupt any candidate's rally beyond asking a question during the designated question and answer period, why shouldn't you expect the possibility of being whacked by a billy club? On National Geographic's program The Boonies, it was pointed out that only American Indians are allowed to fish with gill nets on Lake Michigan. If this is a concession to preserving an ancient culture, why is it allowed to take place from a motorized watercraft designed by a white man? Such technologies were not part of an alleged way of life stretching back centuries. Are Indians so dim-witted that they are not capable of learning how to fish with other techniques? So apparently color of skin ought to be taken into consideration when law is applied after all. Sally Fields admits she did not like the film The Amazing Spider-Man. So she should be assured that, regarding certain aspects, that feeling is mutual. Her depiction had to have been the worst casting and portrayal of Aunt May in the history of the character. So why is Lindsey Graham's remarks regarding violence being done to Ted Cruz more acceptable to milksop Republicans than Donald Trump wanting to bop a protesting beatnik? If Jorge Ramos is concerned about hatred on the part of Trump, does that propagandist ever condemn La Raza and Hispano supremacist hate group? Donald Trump is blamed for the disturbances that erupt in response to his rallies. Applying similar logic, is Belgium at fault for the terrorist attack because authorities there arrested a jihadist in connection to the attack on Paris? It is exclaimed that, without a brokered Republican convention, we would not have had President Lincoln. You either think he was the greatest president of them all, or the spawn of the devil himself. However, one has to admit that phase of American history wasn't exactly the most enjoyable that this nation has ever endured. Hillary Clinton insisted that America needs a president to defend the country and not embarrass it. This from a woman whose husband got a blowjob from an intern while beneath the desk in the Oval Office. Some will respond that Hillary should be considered on her own merits. Fair enough. Are we to consider her drunken bar hopping in Colombia the pinnacle of American foreign policy? Chum Lee of History Channel's Pawn Stars has been arrested in connection with a number of sexual assault, firearms, and controlled substance violations. As such, shouldn't the series he is a cast member have been yanked from the programming rotation by now? After all, Dog the Bounty Hunter, Duck Dynasty, and Paula Deen were tossed off television for a period for mere verbal formulations that in no way violated any duly authorized statute. The Dukes of Hazzard was banished from television entirely, with the majority of its cast either now dead or living in post-celebrity obscurity. Bowing to threats by environmentalists and animal rights rancateurs, SeaWorld has announced an end to its killer whale breeding programs and ultimately theatrical performances involving these particular cetaceans. Given that for decades SeaWorld served as a front for the Anheuser-Busch Corporation, does that mean that should the temperance lobby become sufficiently agitated, booze peddlers ought to cease the distribution of noxious beverages despite a desire for them by a larger percentage of the population? Moral libertines will likely retort that, unlike orcas in captivity, no one is harmed as a result of intoxicating libations. Battered spouses, neglected children, and those mangled in a variety of auto accidents might argue otherwise. If Panera Bread is now emphasizing in an advertising campaign that their food is clean, the concerned consumer really needs to ask how many times have these victuals been dropped on the floor. A commercial mentioned that there are something like 28 flavors of Pop-Tarts, yet when one goes to a supermarket, there is usually only one or two kinds there on the shelf. In a sermon, Prosperity Minister Chuck Pierce confessed that tomorrow booty is coming to my house. Does he mean as in wealth or something else? Given the number of sex scandals that plague churches these days, it can never hurt to ask for clarification. If women, the term said with its politically correct intonations, are so dim-witted that they should not be held responsible for the decision to slaughter their unborn children, why should such women be trusted with the right to vote? If women that have had abortions should not be charged because the act was not criminal at the time the act was committed, neither should specific Germans be held accountable for what they did at the time of the Holocaust, because those deeds were also legal under German law. Some might respond how there is a natural law transcending temporal statutory law. If you are unwilling to apply that in the case of the unborn and the mother, you still do not fully embrace the idea of the unborn being a fully alive human. Albert Mohler, on an episode of his daily briefing, said that the guilty party in an abortion is the one actually taking the life of the unborn child, and not the woman seeking it. Extrapolating from such logic, the best way for a man to get rid of a wife he no longer desires is to contract with an underworld hitman. That way, only the mercenary gangster should be guilty of murder. If women that have had abortions shouldn't be punished, neither should men negligent in paying their child support. At least in the case of such fathers, the children are still alive and not shish kebabbed. If preachers are going to raise a fuss about folks coming to worship service but not Sunday school, they shouldn't be surprised when these targets of their articulated ire eventually drop the worship service as well. Geraldo is still tossing a hissy fit that Ted Cruz's remarks concerning New York values are a veiled form of anti-Semitism. So apparently, it is not enough that we must allow establishmentarian elites to destroy our culture. We are also not allowed to say anything about it either. Are we to assume that those dwelling in New York City articulate nothing but positive support in regards to rural Christians? During episodes of the drama Quantico, isn't it racist for the Indian gal to advertise the Jungle Book? If color doesn't matter, and we aren't to notice it under threats of ostracism, why not the blonde chick so pale that it looks like she's never seen the sun introduce the commercial? The radicals jacked out of shape at Duck Dynasty's Phil Robertson for praying as he felt led by the Holy Spirit at the NASCAR race he sponsored out of his own pocket are the same ones all in favor of biological men urinating in the same restroom at the same time as your underage daughter. This is Frederick Meekins.